Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you again for joining us to our lunchtime webinar. We are talking out about breastfeeding a baby with Down syndrome. As you may know, if you've been to one of our webinars before, I'm Lou. I'm the Healthcare Training Manager for Down Syndrome UK, stroke positive about Down syndrome. And we are very, very pleased to be joined today by Sarah Ojar, who's our breastfeeding expert, who's going to tell you all about breastfeeding a baby with Down syndrome. There's just, before I introduce Sarah properly, I just give you a little bit of background, as I always do, about our charity in case this is the first webinar that you've been to. So Down Syndrome UK, we're a national charity. We have a healthcare initiative positive about Down syndrome PADS, which I'm sure you all know about, hope you do. And our vision is very simple. We want a world where everyone with Down syndrome lives their best life. And I think we're now in our 9th or 10th year. So I guess we're kind of in our infancy, but we've been doing a lot of things since we started as a national charity. We're a parent-led charity. We work very closely with the Royal College of Midwives. We've got 2 e-learning modules. One of them is breastfeeding. They're coffee time modules, which you might like to take a look at. And we've done a lot of research into how women were given the news that their baby has Down syndrome and the effect it may have on their mental health. And that is work that's been published. And we work closely with the Institute of Health Visiting and we collaborate with lots of healthcare organisations, actually. So our main role that we really proud of is the fact that we champion the lived experience. So often you may come across families who have babies with Down syndrome and then they go along their way and you may not see them again, and not knowing whether, how they felt about their meeting with you or their appointment with you, and, what was good for them and what didn't work for them and what might have been better for them. So we definitely champion the lived experience. We're empowering our parents to make sure they're aware that they belong to a strong community. We educate professionals. We use that lived experience to educate professionals like today. We also use that lived experience to affect change. Nicola, our CEO, and I are both part of the National Down Syndrome Policy Group, and we use those lived experiences to hopefully change policy. And we use that lived experience to enlighten the public, hopefully. Just to show you that we're a credible organisation, we need to update this. We haven't completed our 2025 survey, but the latest one shows you that our parents do use us as a source of information. They do find our information useful, and they trust what we tell them. So Down Syndrome UK, positive about Down syndrome, we fill a lot of gaps when it comes to supporting families, but we're also here to support professionals as well. So we have a range of publications. I'm sure Sarah's going to be telling you about our breastfeeding guide and our lived experience of breastfeeding, but we also have our Nobody Told Me book, which is lived experiences, really. It's Nobody Told Me the Truth About Down syndrome, which is for professionals and families. We give it out as free to families that join our early years support network. And Little Orange Book of Knowledge is like a postnatal guide, and your families can access that online. And we're very proud of the work we've been doing to help families through any kind of heart surgery, but that's another webinar. So as I mentioned, we're a parent-led charity, and we consider ourselves to be experts through experience. We know what a good experience looks like, and we're empowering our parents to ensure that they get that good experience as well. We work very closely with hospitals, universities, all healthcare providers that may come across children with Down syndrome. And so we believe that everybody who has a child with Down syndrome, they can access all health services free from out-of-date attitudes and language. That's one of our reasons for being. So that's just a brief introduction about what we do as a charity. And now Sarah's going to tell you all about breastfeeding a baby with Down syndrome and how we can support the families that you come across. So over to you, Sarah.
Hi everybody, welcome and thanks for joining in today to hear all about breastfeeding a baby with Down syndrome. I have been doing this role with PADS for quite a few years now, and I'm also a breastfeeding peer supporter, and I do some doula work, and I'm a mum of 5. I've breastfed all my children, still breastfeeding the last one, so it'll be 12 years in May that I've been breastfeeding for continuously pretty much. And this is my son who has Down syndrome. He's a bit older now than he was in this picture. He's 9 now, and my big passion is advocating and sharing about breastfeeding a baby with Down syndrome. So yeah, that's me. One of the reasons that my role came about was we did have a lot of concerns around lack of information and support around breastfeeding. So we have a Facebook group for expecting parents. So anybody that's had either a confirmed diagnosis or a high chance of having a baby with Down syndrome during their pregnancy can join our group. And what we were finding were a lot of mums in the group were saying to us things like they've been told that not to get their hopes up about breastfeeding, or that they wouldn't be able to breastfeed, or not to even try breastfeeding. And the same with our new parents group as well. People have been told not to bother trying, or the first sign of any kind of problems with feeding, it was blamed on the baby having Down syndrome. So my role came about because we wanted to share more up-to-date information and how people can best support. So initially we did a survey in 2021, which we repeated again in 2022, just to kind of give us an idea of what sort of being the information that's about and what experiences people are having. We also, as I mentioned, we have the Facebook groups, and one of those that we have is a peer support group, which people can join once their baby is here. In that group, there are lots and lots of parents that have experience. There's also some breastfeeding peer supporters, again, that all have babies with Down syndrome themselves. So you're still getting that lived experience as well as the expert knowledge. And we also have some IBCLC in there as well that are parents also. We also run an antenatal breastfeeding information session that parents can join, both parents can join, and I will share some similar information to what's in this presentation and just how they can prepare during their pregnancy and what to expect when the baby's here. And as Lou shared, we also have the resources that people can access online as well. So inclusion is something we're all responsible for. It's easy to think of it as something that happens in a workplace or in schools, but it starts at birth and includes the fundamental right to have support to feed your baby however you choose. And some of the challenges that we've looked at and identified when looking at breastfeeding a baby with Down syndrome, we've kind of split them into two areas. So one is like physiological, which would be more to do with the actual baby and some issues that can occur. And then the other is like the wider societal or just other factors that can influence a feeding journey. And there are quite a lot of those things, maybe more so than the actual baby themselves. So first, looking at things that can actually that are to do with the baby that can have an impact. We know that most if not all babies with Down syndrome are born with hypotonia, which is low muscle tone, and that can be to a varying degree. So some babies with Down syndrome may have really, really low tone. Some babies not so much. And depending on where the low tone is in the body, obviously that can have different impacts on different things. So when it comes to breastfeeding, sort of around the jaw and the mouth, that's going to have an impact on feeding because they obviously need that to be able to latch. And also just across the body in general, across the torso, we know that babies need to feel very secure and supported and stable in order to be able to feed. And babies with Down syndrome, that can be, they may need some more support. So that can be harder for the baby and also harder for the parents as well, because if you're used to holding a baby, babies with Down syndrome can feel heavier. So it can be harder to give them that same amount of support. So that's something to think about. Babies that need to have surgery, that can have an impact on the feeding journey. So for instance, something like having bowel surgery might mean that the baby has to be nil by mouth up until they have the surgery. They may not be able to even have any milk until the surgery's done. And that would just be about protecting the mother's milk supply, keeping the milk going and doing lots of skin to skin and things like that, all the usual things that you would do to support a baby that's not able to go to the breast straight away. And with heart surgery, which generally tends to happen later on, that can impact in the way that breastfeeding can sometimes be too tiring for a baby that has a heart condition. So they may have to be fed like by tube, things like that. Or it could be that they have to have some kind of supplementation to make them gain weight quicker, ready for the surgery. So again, it's just looking at how you can protect the feeding journey. A lot of babies do go on to breastfeed after heart surgery, so it's just about keeping the milk supply going, keeping the baby close, things like that. Prematurity would be something else. And a lot of babies with Down syndrome, they are born at like early term late prem, so maybe around 36, 37 weeks, or 35, between 35 and 37 weeks. So that can have an impact in the way that, in the similar to other babies that might be born around that time, they can be a bit more sleepy. Feeding can just take a bit more time to establish anyway. The reason for babies with Down syndrome being born around that time can be to do with the placenta. The placenta also carries the trisomy, so it may not function as well as a typical baby's placenta, which is why they sometimes will bring babies, induce them early around that time. Delayed suck-swallow mechanism, again, that comes hand in hand with babies that are born a bit early, so that can just take a bit of time. There's a lot going on in order to make that motion of breastfeeding happen for a baby. So sometimes for babies with Down syndrome, as with a lot of things, can just take a little bit longer to establish. So it again, protecting the milk supply, keeping things going. Sleepiness, as I mentioned before, can be linked to babies that are born a little bit early, but also just babies with Down syndrome in general can be sleepy when they're born for longer than a typical baby might be. So in that case, it's making sure that you're watching for really early feeding cues, and they may not even show feeding cues as well as a typical baby or in the same way. So it's about making sure you're waking them to feed, feeding frequently. My baby didn't really cry that much when he was born. He would tend to just save up all his energy and just do like one scream. So we had to just make sure we were feeding him and not relying on those kind of cues and things like that. And as I've mentioned in pretty much every single point in this, is keep the milk supply going. It can just take longer for babies with Down syndrome to establish breastfeeding. It might not. Some babies will just come out and feed straight away and there'll be no extra problems. But if there are problems and it is taking longer, is keep the milk supply going. That is one of the key things. And then looking at the wider societal challenges, it's things like overmedicalisation of the baby. And obviously, when a baby is born, if there are interventions that are required, that obviously takes precedence. But if there's no rush for any additional testing or interventions, can that golden time be protected? Lots of skin to skin, baby to stay with mum as long as possible, things like that. Diagnostic overshadowing, which I sort of briefly mentioned, which is basically when something's occurring and it's blamed on the baby having Down syndrome. So in this case, it would be, let's say, for example, a baby isn't feeding well, not latching well at all, and it's just instantly blamed on the baby having Down syndrome. So it's because your baby's got Down syndrome, they can't feed, we're just going to stop feeding, stop trying, when actually, like, maybe baby's got a tongue tie, or it's just basic position and attachment. So it's just about kind of going back to basics and looking at actually what's actually happening. Let's take Down syndrome out of the equation and let's look at what's actually happening with the baby. Women's mental health, this can obviously have an impact. We do a lot of work with around sort of antenatal, but obviously a lot of people don't find out their baby's got Down syndrome until the baby's actually born. So that can have an impact on like bonding and just how they're feeling when the baby's born. It can be a surprise, it could be a shock. So that can obviously have an impact on the feeding journey. Low expectations, which I've mentioned before, people being told, don't get your hopes up, or you might not be able to feed, or, and that can come from, it does come from some medical professionals. It comes from things they've read online. It can come from friends and family. It's going to be too difficult, don't try. Even just a few days ago, I saw a pregnant woman who's having a baby with Down syndrome talking, and she was asking for bottle recommendations because she's like, oh, I was really hoping to breastfeed, but I know it's probably not going to happen. So, and I was like, no, it might happen. So here's what you need to know about trying to breastfeed your baby. So just about being realistic, I would say, being realistic to people. It may take a bit longer to establish, but it's certainly a great chance. Lack of information around colostrum harvesting and donor milk. So I know that in lots of pregnancies, being talked to about colostrum harvesting happens, you know, as part of the pathway. I'm not sure if that always happens when people are expecting a baby with Down syndrome, or there's a high chance. So just about knowing that that's an option, and doing that and finding out more information about that, because that can be really beneficial in the first few days to have that colostrum there. And also donor milk, and I know that's not available in all circumstances, but if it's good to know about it, to know it's possibly an option, to at least ask if it's an option, because if you don't ask, you don't get, you know. And a lot of people just aren't even aware that it's an option. Down syndrome specific growth chart not used in the Red Book. So this is a really, really important one for successful breastfeeding. When the Red Books are issued, if you have a baby with Down syndrome, you should also be given a green insert. And I think there's a picture of it later on in the slides, which I'll show you. And it has different growth charts to a typical baby, and also different milestone markers. So that can be really, really nice and inclusive. But for feeding, it's really key that they have that. What can happen is if a baby is putting weight on and it's plotted on the typical baby graph, it may look as if the baby's not putting on enough weight, when if it was actually plotted on the Down syndrome specific growth chart, baby's doing absolutely fine. And what can happen is if it looks like the baby's not putting enough weight on, then parents are being told, you know, you need to either pump and give a supplement, or you need to give some formula, things like that. And that can have the impact of, obviously can impact the journey, because then you're having to express and things like that. It makes it harder, but it's also making the parents feel like they aren't doing a good job, or like they maybe start doubting their milk supply and things like that, when actually if it had been plotted on the correct chart, then there's absolutely no problems at all. And then another problem is sort of ongoing support in transitioning from an NG tube. So we know that some babies do come home with an NG tube, and some parents have shared with us that they didn't feel as supported when they got home into how to transition their baby off the tube, like because they come from knowing exactly how much the baby's getting with the tube, to then kind of when they are breastfeeding, they're not sure how to know if it's been a good feed, how much baby's getting, whether they still need to top up down the NG tube, whether the tube comes out, is baby feeding well, you know. There's a lot to kind of go through, and if especially if a parent hasn't breastfed before, it can be quite hard for them to know what successful breastfeeding looks like. So yeah, just about if you come across somebody that is NG tube feeding and they want to try and transition the baby off that, then just giving support in that area. And I won't stay too long on this page, because I'm sure if you are all people that work around breastfeeding, you will know the benefits of breastfeeding, but they can be even more so for babies with Down syndrome. So increased bonding, improve mental well-being, pride and accomplishment, improve confidence in meeting baby's needs, improved oral strength, improved immune system and gut health, contribution to brain development, contribution to palate shaping and oral health, reduces hospital admissions, and tailored to baby's physiology. And lots of those can link going forward onto speech and onto weaning onto solids and things like that. So it's just all the benefits for a typical baby. They're there for babies with Down syndrome, and probably even more so. And these are some of the key findings from our breastfeeding survey. So these are we asked people to share some experiences. So these are some of the comments that we pulled out. So midwives suggested she wouldn't be able to latch and didn't have the strength to suckle. My hopes to breastfeed were not really embraced. I had support whilst in hospital, but no real support afterwards. I received a phone call from a breastfeeding specialist once discharged, but that was all, and it wasn't very helpful. And Amy, mum to Connie, was advised by a doctor in the NICU that it would be unlikely she'd be able to breastfeed and not to get hopes up, and yet they're breastfeeding really well. And I fed Libby exclusively on breast milk via expressing every 2 hours for 12 weeks. She never took to feeding directly at the breast, and she didn't feel like she had enough support to try and make that transition. And one of the key findings that we had was that 46% of women were advised by a healthcare professional that they may not be able to breastfeed their baby purely because the baby has Down syndrome. So that's not with any additional factors. That's just because the baby has Down syndrome. So that's obviously almost half, which is quite high. And 54% advised that they didn't receive the support they needed around breastfeeding from their midwifery team. And we know that midwives are really stretched and all of that. So we do appreciate that. But this is just what came out in the survey. And then, so these are some comparisons with the UNICEF data, which I know is super duper old. So it's not the best comparison, but it's the best we had. So initiation rates back in 2010 were 81%, just UK wide. And we found that we had initiation rate of 77%. So similar, but not as high as the UK wide initiation rate. However, UNICEF reports only 34% still being breastfed at 6 months. We have a rate of 66% still breastfed at 6 months. And I think one of the reasons why our parents perhaps breastfeed longer is because it can take longer to establish feeding. So if you're really working hard to get feeding going and you only establish feeding and you get comfortable with it at 3 months, you're more likely to continue on feeding past 6 months just because it's what you're used to. Sometimes babies with Down syndrome may wean onto solids a little bit later, so that can have an impact as well. And also just that sense of pride and accomplishment of doing something that you know is beneficial to your baby. And for me personally, I just found it so easy. With everything else that we were having to think about, like appointments and physio and starting to do speech therapy and things like that, to just be able to breastfeed and not have to worry about bottles and things like that, I just found it was a no-brainer for me. Like there was no reason for me to stop breastfeeding, and I fed my son until he was 2.5 just because it was just so easy. So what does successful breastfeeding support look like? So informed and realistic expectations, as I've mentioned before, as much as we don't want people to say that babies with Down syndrome can't breastfeed or you've got, it's really minimal chance, we don't want to just come along and say it's going to be easy, there's no problem, it's definitely going to happen. Like we want informed and realistic expectations. So yes, there is a really good chance that you'll be able to breastfeed your baby. However, it may take a little bit longer to establish and you might need a bit of extra support and things like that. We want back to basics first. So as I mentioned before, if there's a problem with feeding or baby's not feeding well, we want to be looking in what we would look at usually. So position and attachment, physical restrictions such as tongue tie, all those things like that you would look at with a typical baby. So awareness of what helps with the low muscle tone. So something like a supportive hold or cushion. And I know that with breastfeeding cushions, they don't always get the best sort of like reputation. A lot of people don't use them correctly, but if they're used correctly, in the case for babies with Down syndrome, they can be really, really helpful just to give that stability to the baby so that they can focus on the latch. The dancer hold, which you can see in that picture there, is a way that you can help with efficient milk transfer. So you can almost it gives the baby some stability around the jaw. It looks like you're almost holding the baby to the breast, but the baby still has the flexibility and the movement to do the normal breastfeeding motions, but you're just giving a bit of stability. And actually, when I breastfed my son, I didn't know about this hold, but I used to instinctively, I'd put like a finger just underneath his chin, just to kind of to move along with his chin movements, just to give a bit more stability, because he did used to leak quite a lot of milk out of his mouth. And also nipple shields, again, they don't get the best like reputation amongst breastfeeding support circles, but a lot of our families have said that nipple shields have been a complete game changer and has been what's been able to get their baby on the breast. So yeah, again, used properly, they can be a real help. As mentioned before, options of donor milk, especially in the NICU setting. I know all different places have different criteria, but I think babies with Down syndrome are in that category where they should have high priority for it, just because of the the risk to the gut and things like that. People with Down syndrome are more prone to constipation and problems with the gut as they get older. So that's what I'd heard anyway. Plan and support, again, how to phase from an NG tube, bottles, or even transitioning from bottle to breast. So if you've got a baby that's like having a lot of express milk using a bottle, but maybe breastfeeding part of the time, just how to make that transition to breastfeeding more at the breast more frequently. And again, ensuring the correct growth chart so that weight gain expectations are accurate. Lou, can you skip to the next page?
Yeah, I have on mine.
Oh, it's not on mine.
Has the best payday pick-me-up
It's, I don't know if it's skipped on anyone else's or not.
Okay, I'll go back and then I'll come back again.
Thanks.
See the next page.
Can you see it yet, Sarah?
No, is it my computer?
I can't either. I've still got.
You can't
I
either.
can't either.
No,
I can't
No.
either.
Oh,
Not on ours either.
I don't know what to do because I've now moved.
Maybe stop sharing and then share it again.
Okay,
Maybe stop sharing for a second, then reshare. See.
okay.
I feel like we might have lost Lou.
Oh gosh, I could try and share mine because I've got it open on.
Yeah, probably best bet, Sarah. I think Lou's got a technical difficulty.
Oh dear. Right, just bear with me, everyone. Let me find my one. Won't be a second. There's only like 2 pages left as well. Okay, I'm going to try and share my screen now. Okay, can you see it?
Yeah, we can see it. We can see
Yeah,
your full
okay,
screen at the
Okay,
moment.
amazing. Right. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, but we can see your full screen,
Yes.
not just the slideshow.
Oh, yeah, don't worry. Yeah, I don't know how to start the presentation. It's fine. It's all fine. We'll just go with this. Don't worry. Yeah, right. Successful wider support. So knowledge of local and national Down syndrome support groups, such as ourselves, and anything local that you've got. So if you've got a local support group, it's great to maybe contact them and see if they have any resources, or some of them give out like packs for new babies and things like that. And it's just nice so that when you are dealing with families, you know, to be like, oh, I know of a group, like it just makes them feel like you can help them and they feel supported. Signpost to Down syndrome specific breastfeeding resources, so such as the ones that Lou shared earlier that we have a lived experience book, and we have like a breastfeeding guide. And then also all of the major like breastfeeding organizations have pages like related to Down syndrome. Some of them link back to our resources, but some have like different stories and things like that. Supporting parents that may choose to exclusively pump. So if they're not able to get baby on the breast, just them knowing that actually this is an option that they can have is to carry on just pumping. And it's not the easiest option, but some people do it, and they do it successfully. Language, and I always feel funny just including such a small snippet because Lou does like loads of presentations on like language and stereotypes, but just avoiding language such as Down's baby. The Down syndrome community prefer a person first language, so a baby with Down syndrome, a person with Down syndrome, and consider if reference to the baby having Down syndrome is even required. And also to avoid sort of generalizations and sweeping statements. And I think as parents, we've all heard the classic one, oh, people with Down syndrome, they're always so happy and so loving. And, you know, honestly, if you've had somebody with that you're close to that has Down syndrome, you will know that that's just not true. Like they are capable of feeling the full range of emotions that everybody would feel, as you know, the same as everybody else. And
I'm
yeah,
back.
sometimes
Can you see that now? Sorry to interrupt.
yes, I can
Yes.
see yours. Yeah.
Do you want me to carry on?
Everyone... Yeah, you can carry on. Yeah, that's
Okay.
fine. Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, we were just talking about generalizations and sweeping statements. So yeah, I know what I would say with my son is he's very open with his emotions. So whatever he's feeling, you're going to know he's feeling. So if he's happy, then everyone knows he's happy. But if he's cross, everyone's going to know he's cross. So he doesn't hide his emotions at all. But again, that could just be him. That's not necessarily something that everybody with Down syndrome does. And then also just being sensitive to the situation. So a family that have had, you know, months to get used to a diagnosis may be in a very different place to somebody who's just found out that morning or has been told, we think your baby might have Down syndrome, but we're waiting on blood test results and things like that. So just kind of, yeah, being sensitive to the situation and how families are feeling at that time. And then this is the red book insert. So it's like a green insert. It has quite a few pages in it, and the first section is around like milestones. So you'd normally say it's like, oh, babies smile between an average of this week and this week, and then it's like a wider one for people with Down syndrome. So, you know, it's nice that families can see something that's accurate for their baby, that's, you know, something for them, and obviously the importance of the growth chart. And usually when I run these sessions, there's always people that weren't aware of this growth chart. So it is one really important thing to take away from the webinar, and also just to check whether if you are sort of responsible in your departments or wherever you work for issuing red books or things like that, just making sure you have those inserts to give out, really. Yeah. And then going forward, some of the other things that we're doing, we're always looking to update and develop our training and resources. We're running more information sharing sessions. We can, if you have like teams that you work with that you think would benefit from the similar session, I'm happy to do sessions like with small groups or wider groups, or speak at like conferences and things like that. We did do a healthcare professional survey, and the results of that are on our website. We're always looking at collaborations. If you wanted to hear more about my breastfeeding journey with my son, I've done a podcast with the Latch League and also with Emma Pickett. I've been on her podcast as well, so you could go away and listen to that if you wanted to hear me talk some more. And I believe the head of our charity, Nicola, she's doing some research into the tube feeding pathway and things like that around NG tube feeding. And that's my email address. If anybody wants to contact me about anything, I'm always happy to help with support or questions that you've got. And Lou, do we have time for any questions at the end?
Yeah, we do. Sorry that I left you in the lurch there.
That's all right.
It's always my greatest fear that I'm going to be chucked out of the meeting, and I did get chucked out of the meeting. So thank you for sharing your expertise on breastfeeding baby with Down syndrome. Just to conclude everything, we have a closed group for healthcare professionals, any healthcare professionals that come across babies, children with Down syndrome. So do think about joining into that, where you'll get information about what we're up to, what are our latest publications, because we change our literature all the time, and any research that we're doing. And also, you know, for you to share your best practice or ask for any kind of advice, that's a good place to go. We, as you know, we have our lunchtime webinars, and the next one is 24th of February, which is me speaking, hopefully without being chucked out of the meeting, about the Down Syndrome Act, because the guidance is now up for public consultations, and there is an annex attached to that which has kind of best practice recommendations, and I'm going to be going through in maternity what they've recommended in terms of best practice. So that is on the 24th of February. So, you know, do register for that if that's something that you'd be interested in. So that's our website. We've already done the email address, and also there's a QR code there to fill in our evaluation form if you found this webinar useful, and it also gives you an opportunity to give feedback on the information we've given you, but also if you want to suggest any other webinars that you might like us to put on for you.